Right. I do want to mention here, again, the kind participation. And they're actually going to be upset with me for showing this big picture here and for putting this up because Cambridge Design Partnership has been just really awesome. And if you don't know what they are, they're a design house that based at Cambridge, and they basically help companies, small companies and large companies, to all okay, thank you, Johan. Thank you. No problem. There will be a recorded version of this, and I will make sure it goes up as a recorded version as well. So they actually did a really good job on this product here, which was the Titan Medical's single port next generation that was going to come, which I think was called the ENOS system. And they contacted me and asked me to come and look at it, and I thought it was really great, the work that they'd done. And what they do is that they'll help companies to really solve the problems around their robots. So if your company is struggling a little bit with some of those feature sets or getting them on the devices, this is the sort of team that you want to talk to. And the reason why I really like working with Cambridge Design Partnership, and why I was very happy to, I don't do a lot of sponsored stuff, but I was really happy to have them on, is because they're just a bunch of lovely people, actually. And they get it, right? They're a big company, but they're a small team in that big company. And they've just been really, really good. And they do believe in education. They didn't want me to put their logo on this or anything. So I'm probably embarrassing them a little bit now. But it was lovely of them to do that for everyone so that we could get more people on, and that I can do more of these things. So if you're in part of the design team, or you're just curious to see what they do, just there you go. Take a note of that email and just send a hello, or just give them a shout out and talk to them. They're a great bunch of people there, and really nice to be around as well and spend time with. So thank you very much to them for making these kind of events possible, and we are going to do more of these as well. So encourage people to come to these events. Okay, strap in. Are we ready? Good. Right. So I got a lot of Q&A. I don't know I'll get through all of these because I've got about 4 pages. I got about 100 questions, and I've tried to put them into buckets, and I'm going to try and answer some of these. They're in no particular order. And if I don't get through to the end, what I might do is stay online. You can all run off and go and do whatever. I'll just stay online and record the answers so that you can watch this in a replay. And I think I can get you the replay. Okay. So Q&A. So the question group was around what's training, what's the right way to do it, competency certifications. So I actually had a very good partner, Mark Slack, who was the chief medical officer of CMR Surgery, and he was really rigorous on training for years, known him for 30 years, and he did great training from laparoscopic, etc. And I sit and watch a lot of the thinking around training and who's responsible for what. What I do believe is that societies and surgical institutions are responsible for, procedural training. For training people how to do procedures, it should be done by professional people. And there's lots of societies out there that can do that. If we're talking here about what's the training on the robot, which is sometimes called buttonology, which came out of South Florida. So from the buttonology, the training the right way to do it, I think it depends on your system. But basically, the right way to do it, there's a right way to do it from a clinical point of view, and it's going towards competency. Not everyone learns at the same way, the same speed, the same time. So therefore, I think that what can happen is getting to a proficiency level is very, very important. And what certification should you give them? I think as a company, all you can give them is that you've trained them to the standards on being able to use your system. I don't think you can certify them that they're going to be able to do good surgery, because I think that's not for companies to do that. Personal feeling on this. Should you be supporting peer-to-peer training? Yes. Should you, if somebody wants to learn how to do a colorectal, that you should be supporting having them use colorectal robotics and supporting those courses, but not doing it yourselves as a company. I'm not a big believer in companies doing surgical training. I think that surgeon societies and institutions in the countries are the best ones to do that and the best qualified and the best legally to do that. That's my sensation. The training should have a lot of buttonology. You need to train all of the operating room staff. You need to train the surgical sterile services staff. So anyone who's reprocessing instruments, don't ignore that training. Make sure that that's done the right way. Not as easy as some people might think. There should be a blended set of training, a lot of simulation. I'm a big fan of a lot of simulation before. So if you've not got a simulator on your device, get a damn simulator on your device. Work with some of the simulation companies that are out there, very, very good. So the simulation, then there should be a lot of hands-on with the robot. And if you can do that in VR first, even better. And then if you do hands-on with the robot, all of that training pathway will help. And then really you need to, if they want to do it on tissue, then, there are a lot of pressures to reduce the amount of tissue from a cost perspective, but also from a moralistic point of view to reduce the amount of cadavers or pigs or things. Make sure that you are trying to reduce the amount of tissue. That would be my feeling. And then from a training point of view, have really good proctors and preceptors. And I think this is where telerobotics is going to come in, because when people go back, they need to have either a proctor or a preceptor. And you need to have qualified proctors and preceptors, not just somebody who's done a couple of cases. They need to know professionally how to support cases, is my idea. And I think you need support for how many cases they need until they are competent and proficient at doing the procedures. So there's no one size fits all, but I think that it's incumbent upon the companies to really teach them how to use the product in the safe and correct way. And I think it's incumbent on the companies to support the training, such as proctorships or different things like ERCAD or ORSI or different places around the world, to make sure that people get enough hands-on training that when they first ever use it on a patient, they're comfortable with it. So that's my piece on training. Marketing a surgical robot. Well, the first thing I want to say is that I watch LinkedIn all the time, and I hate to say it, but most of the posts that I find on there, including mine, by the way, but there's a lot of garbage that's on there. It's just rah, rah, rah stuff that, aren't we great? I don't think that the marketing has to be how good our robot is and how crap everyone else is. I think what you have to do is you have to be able to market and explain why we're different and why you should even bother looking at us. And I think that marketing has moved on. Again, how you do that depends on your company style, what you're trying to be. But messaging house is really hard, because you've got to be able to know your unique selling proposition and therefore market into that. I think that the bar is very, very high. Originally set by Patrick Pordage, who set the bar the highest when he was at CMR. And I think Intuitive has leaned into that. But if you look at Intuitive's marketing, it's very, very high. And it's always on message and on beat. And it's always very good. Whereas I see a lot of you with very confusing messaging. It's just like random. We've done some cases here, or I don't feel there's a marketing message behind it. It just feels like you've got a marketing person just throwing shit and seeing what sticks. Go back to the old marketing ways of campaigns. Go and look at Rory Sutherland. Rory Sutherland will help you out here. Go and see him on YouTube. You need to be marketing to business, and you need to have a really good messaging house and a uniqueness about your messaging and a brand. Not going into it too much now, but one of the most important things you can do as a company is have a brand. I don't know what the brands are. And to the Chinese companies, your Chinese brands don't work in the West. They're actually fall flat. I think Renovo's done a great job, and Zihan, if you're on here, I don't know if you're on here, Zihan, you've done a great job of transporting anything Chinese to be feeling very, very good for the markets. Localize it for the markets. Chinese stuff works really well in China. Western stuff works garbage in China. It doesn't work that well, the marketing. Hey, Craig. Yeah, Rory is awesome. Rory's awesome. So thanks, Craig. You have to really target your messaging. You have to have a total message house, why you exist, why your robot is the one that is, what it means to the people, what it means to the business of the hospital and the surgeons, etc. But then you've got to also tailor that to the local markets. Brazilian marketing is very different than what you're going to market in Germany. It's just nuances in the message, and I love marketing. I'm marketing born and bred, and I think that creating a really good brand as well that resonates and people understand what do you stand for, not just what does your robot have as features, and how you translate that into the real benefits. So a lot of people just go on there and say we have telesurgery. So fucking what? You have telesurgery. So what? What does that mean? What does it mean to the people you're trying to message to and target to? Get into their heads, understand how do I translate what I mean from marketing, that message of telesurgery? What do I mean? What do they care about? That's marketing into the robot, and the bar is very, very high, and Intuitive's doing an absolutely outstanding job, from their visuals to their messages to what it means to, we do this for the people. It's not about the robot, it's about the end result for the patient. So lean into that and really do that. Don't market your surgical robot, market your surgical robotics benefits to the patients and all the way back to your USP. Endoluminal robots, when are they ready? When are they ready? Sorry, I'm missing a Y. When are they ready? They're actually ready now. So, if you look at endobronchial, they're out there. Ion and Monarch are out there now, and Galaxy with Galaxy Noah is sort of there. They're out there now. They're doing their stuff, and it's going to get bigger and faster. And EndoQuest, big shout out to Eduardo and the team at EndoQuest. They're here and now. If you're a robotics company and you've not got an endoluminal robot, that is the next wave, and it's going to work with, by the way, going to work with the multi-arms and with the single ports. But if you've not got an endoluminal GI robot on the way, you're going to miss a big boat here. And I think that Intuitive will drop one within 12 to 18 months, and I'm probably being ambitious there, but I think they will. I think the other companies are all working on them. You go look at some of the Auris patents at J&J. I'm not giving them a shout out yet today, but J&J as well is doing it. They are doing good things, and I think Otava, I've heard some feedback that it's it's pretty good. So looking forward to that one. But J&J, through the Auris acquisition, they got a lot of endoluminal stuff that was in there. I mean, Monarch from their side. Think about that on a endoluminal GI robot. They've got the technology to do it. The combination of that Otava and Monarch. Endourology is coming big. There's 7 robots out there currently that do endourology, either guiding for scopes or guiding for laser fibers. And you've got Monarch 3-arm, which does the PCNL, which is the percutaneous lithotripsy. So basically, endourology is already coming now. And the endoluminal robots are coming thick and fast. Do watch out for EndoQuest. I think they're the leaders at the minute, but there are others coming up there. Neptune is another one to look at, and then you've got Swan Endosurgical. They're going to come, with the big announcement between from Olympus that they're going to be pushing in with Swan Endosurgical. So they are going to be there, and they're going to be very, very important. So keep your eye on the endoluminal robots, because think about it. A lot of colorectal cancers today are taken out because a sessile polyp was missed, and then that became a cancer, and then you had to take the colon out. Whereas in the future, and especially with the AI and the diagnostics really ramping up at the minute, things like GI Genius, you're going to find a lot more things like sessile polyps will be seen, and therefore if there's systems endoluminal to treat them, then those colorectal cases will go away. So even if you've got the world's best multi-arm robot, if there's no cases coming to you, you ain't doing them. So endoluminal robots is going to be really, really big. And it's sort of started now, and EndoQuest is in the middle of their trial for the US at the minute, and I think they're doing well. So yeah, big shout out to the team at EndoQuest there for pushing the envelope there.
Hey everyone, just one quick second to ask a big favor in the middle of this. It really helps me if you hit like, hopefully you like it, but subscribe and turn notifications on. The reason for that is that a lot of these videos are going to come out in multiple parts. And rather than you trying to work out when it's done, or hopefully you see the announcement that it comes out, if you put on the subscribe and the little notify bell, when I put up the new content, it will automatically come to your YouTube and it'll give you a little notification. So if you can just subscribe, like, and again, comments, very, very welcome. If there's other things you want me to do these sessions on, put them in the comments. That will help my channel immensely. And it will keep these things coming. So yeah, help me out.
Market access, yeah. Look, so I think the genie's out of the bottle. I think it's getting harder and harder for people to say, "Oh, robots are just a waste of money." You still got to be able to prove it and prove your robot as well. Payers and governments, they want proof. Purchasers in hospitals, they want some kind of proof. And generically just saying, well, we know that intuitive works, therefore ours works. You'll get so far with that, but you're not going to get all the way with it. So what I would do is I would be really trying to generate data. So if you're doing any clinical trials with your robots, you better be putting health economic arms into that study to help the market access people. And then there's also from the market access, also government lobbying and all that kind of stuff. Hard for the smaller companies to do, but I think from a market access, at least from the payers side of it, giving them some kind of confidence and evidence that your robot has some kind of value in there. And as I say, I'm still seeing way too many clinical studies out there with zero health economic data in there, and you're just wasting your opportunity. Adding an extra couple of tick boxes into the protocol to collect some financial data. Why aren't you doing that? I don't understand it. But yeah, you've got to prove it adds value, and you've got to prove it at a governmental level, and you've got to payer level. On the governmental level, you really do need to be working at government and regional levels. You can't just be working at hospital levels. Take Italy, for example, there was the Tuscany tender, that was a regional one. There's the Lombardia area tenders. They're happening at national and regional levels. So you need to be talking with those institutions. And if you don't have somebody in your company that can actually do that, then you need to hire an agency or get a little bit of your marketing spend on someone who can do market access. There's Colette Hamilton, go and look her up. There's Adele, go and look them up. They're the ones that I remember as well. Go and look at some of these agencies and get them to help you, and at least to map out what you need to do. But yeah, market access is important, and especially as you get bigger. Issues across Europe specifically, yeah. So one of the problems is something called shelf space. There's only so many robots that get bought per year. So all these people, if you added up, I'd love to do this one day. I wish I could do this one day. I'd love everybody anonymously to just send me their spreadsheet from their company on how many robots they're going to sell in 2025, 2026, 2027, 2028, right? You'll get this. It's water, by the way. It's not vodka. It is wine o'clock though here. It's 7:22, so a nice glass of wine would be good. And I know people around the world are probably sat there having a nice little sip and a little drink of beer or wine or whatever at the minute. So cheers to you. I will have one afterwards. But I'd love everyone to send me their sheets, which has their sales, how many systems they're going to sell each year. And I'd love to add those numbers up. And I'd love to do it by country, for example. And if you added everybody's number up of how many robots they're going to sell in, let's say, France, I'll bet you it's going to be 5x how many hospitals will actually buy robots in France. And this is the problem. Okay. The shelf space is filling up, and everyone who's coming late to the game, the shelves are getting filled up. You cannot be late to the games in these markets. And it's just one of the problems. US is, just look at the Da Vinci 5 numbers that went out, but also just the Da Vinci numbers and the average of number of robots. I think we're now at there's 2 Da Vincis per hospital that could or should buy a Da Vinci robot. I think that's the number that I had in my head from the other day. The shelf space is getting full. And in Europe especially, it's getting full. And the budgets are tight. There's only so many robots that can be bought or will be bought in these times. So you've got to make sure that you are only going after the deals where you can go after them. And you've got to make sure that your fantastic sales numbers match the reality of how many robots are out there. If there's 30 companies chasing 30 systems in one country that are going to be bought that year, if it's only 30, it can be more than that, but let's say it's a small country, how many are you really selling? So you've got to match up that in Europe, and the budgets and the tenders, The other thing that you're going to get caught up in Europe is never-ending trials. Every hospital is going to want their free use of their hospital. I could name one right now, but I'm not. And what they're doing is they're just basically they're having everyone do beauty parades. They bring in their robot, they use it for 6 months, and then they go, yeah, yeah, yeah. And they've still got Da Vinci's running in the background. And basically what they're getting is 6 months in blocks of free robotic use. The robot gets dropped in for free. The consumables get used for those first, 50 cases, and then they go, yeah, we don't like it. But they've had 50 free cases, and there's 30 robots, so that's 15 6 months. So they've got at least 7 years. They've got another 6 years to go of just having you all foolishly go and drop your robot in and have it tried. Watch for that. You're going to have never-ending trials in Europe. They're going to just want to use it forever. And before we're going to do the 10, we're going to have 3 months of this, 6 months of this, 3 months of this. It's a really big problem for Europe, and it's just going to get worse. So I think you've got to all stand strong, almost as an industry, and try and stop this, because otherwise none of you are going to sell any robots. Second questions, and we do have 40 minutes left. Adoption in developing countries, intuitive versus generics. So there's a lot of developing countries, and actually I think Edge has just dropped one into Nigeria, which would be considered a developing country. I'm going to say developing in terms of robotics. I don't want to say just from developing from healthcare and stuff. Yes, I think you've got to look at Intuitive has been very disciplined and strategic in not going after every country in the world and dropping one robot into a country because that's where they could have sold one. I think they did that on purpose because you only get economies of scale as a company when you get to 10 plus robots. And if you've got one robot in one country and you've got to build the whole infrastructure just to get that in one country, then of course Intuitive's not going to go and fight for that one there. So we're seeing a lot of robots go into places like Morocco and Ghana and Nigeria and places like this. I think it's fantastic that they want to do that. I think it's brilliant to be able to bring them the healthcare there. But I do wonder whether they will be sustainable systems in terms of profitability for the companies. And I don't mean that in a mean sort of just looking at the money side of things way. That would be pretty horrible of me. But what I mean is the chance of them making profits with a single robot in Nigeria is going to be low. So therefore it's not sustainable. Yeah, who will pay? In a lot of these developing countries, you've got to be careful, right? So a lot of people will look at some of these countries and say, who the hell's going to pay in there? There are very rich subsections of society where, India is very misunderstood a lot by a lot of people in the West. They think that India is some kind of poor country, whatever. You have to go and get that out of your head. But there's a whole raft of people. There's a couple of billion people, and there's a couple of 100 million who are very rich who can pay more than what you would see in first world healthcare. So again, who will pay? Who's got the ability to pay when you're looking at the private sector? So you've got to break that and segment it. Is there a private sector in one of those developing countries that could pay for robotics? In a lot of countries, yes, there's a very rich private sector that can do that, and it's definitely going to get you more than 250 per region cases per robot. So yes, it'll work. Governments and paying, you're going to have to convince a lot of the governments of why they want to do it. Sometimes they'll do it in developing countries because they want to show next generation of healthcare and they want to show advances in healthcare. And you'll get massive disparity in that country from who can get the top best healthcare to who basically gets virtually no access to healthcare. But governments, some of them are willing to pay for that because it helps from press and it helps that government who says we were going to modernize our system, and having a robot is a very good way to say that. So I think you'll see a lot of that in there as well. Real Da Vinci alternatives. Well, it depends what you want, right? So there are real alternatives to the XI. I've done a recent thing on Microport's MedBot 2My. Brilliant alternative, definitely worth looking at. And again, if you're a buyer who's looking at this, decide what you want, what you need. And there are some good alternatives out there. I'm not saying that Intuitives, you should just noticeably not buy Intuitive. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is though, that if you have specific needs. For example, you want something that's not a boom robot, then there are real alternatives to that. Hugo, Versius, SSI, Renova. These are all genuine alternatives to Da Vinci. They work and they've got the minimums. They don't have every feature that a Da Vinci will have. But you need to ask as a buyer, do I need every feature that Da Vinci offers? So when you talk about real alternatives, it depends what you want. If you want something different to a Da Vinci because you want to do publications and you want to be on the podium at ESG or something, then if you're robot number 10,002, you're probably not going to have that many exciting papers. But if you're robot number 1 in Europe of something like an SSI, then you're probably going to be able to do some papers. So it depends what you want. But there are real alternatives out there. There are good alternatives out there. There are alternatives that do very good surgery out there. But you just might not get everything that you dreamed of on your Da Vinci 5. But if you're in the market for something else, then go for it. Should you take a clone? Depends. If you've got a lot of people who've already been on the Da Vincis and you want a smooth up curve, the easier ways to go onto a clone. That I've definitely seen that it's easier to adopt a clone if you've already got a deep user base of XI users, for example. They can literally get on those other robots and drive them tomorrow, and the staff in the OR can do it. But if you want something alternative and you've got people who just don't like being inside the headset, then you might want an open console alternative. So it depends what you want. Right, how long have we got left? Oh, 30 minutes. So surgeons, training of young surgeons. I think this is essential. I think that, again, if I was out there selling robots today, I would be focused on the next generation of surgeons, trying to get surgeons to convert who've already been exposed to the class leading Da Vinci's is very, very hard. I think that if you want to get the next generation, if you're a big enough company with enough deep pockets, I would be going and just training all the next generation and making this a 10-year battle. I wouldn't be trying to win today. I'd be trying to win in 10 years. And if you go and train all the young surgeons and you're the one who got them on your system first and that's what they grew up on, I think you'll own them for life. And I think it'll be harder for them to go elsewhere. So I think training of young surgeons is a huge commercial opportunity. And I would be seriously thinking about, how do I do that for residents and fellows in training? How do I do it for, young registrars? How do I get to that next generation that will be the next level of consultant surgeons who will be not as brainwashed on the intuitive and also not too deep into their own manual laparoscopic where they've got their own foibles. Yeah, I'd be all over training of young surgeons. I think that's the future. And if you can weather the storm for the next 5 years and get the next generation and get that next wave coming through on your robot, yeah, I'd be all over that. What should a buyer look for? I sort of talked about that a little bit. So there's technical characteristics that you need to look for that your surgeons will be happy using it. I think you also need to look for, will that company be around in 10 years? I think that is a legitimate, important question to ask. I think another question to ask is their level of service. Are they going to be able to come and repair that thing if it breaks? And they all break. Every single system can break. And, what does their level of service look like? Do they have to fly their parts in from a third part of the world through 2 different distributors to get you to get the parts? I think you need to look at that and say, how long will we be down for and how critical is that to our hospital operations? That if we lost a week of robotics while we're waiting for spare parts, that's probably a tragedy for some hospitals and not a problem for others. You need to look at, instrument supply. You need to look at, as I say, the disposable supply. You need to be able to make sure that, when you start a case, you can finish a case. What does it look for in terms of disruption to your staff? If you've got 6 Da Vinci's, how much you disrupt your sterilization supply staff by having a different robot? What's it for? If it's going to be for big, major, massive cancer cases, then you might want to go for one of the more advanced robots. If it's going to be to try and do your lap choles and your hernias and some of your benign gynecological cases, you might want something more like a Moon Surgical or a distal motion. Doesn't mean they can't do both, by the way. I want to be clear on that. But there are certain systems that really lean into certain procedures or certain needs of surgeons, as I've said before. And you need to understand what do you really need and therefore match your options as a buyer up to what the company is offering.